International law only exists when powerful countries feel like obeying it. When they don't, the rules are simply paper, and their authority is exposed as an illusion, fragile, fleeting, and ultimately meaningless in the face of raw power. That's a hard truth to swallow, because we're conditioned to believe that the world operates on a system of rules, treaties, and institutions. Courts that uphold justice, charters that define sovereignty, red lines that signal consequences. It's comforting to think that there's a moral code guiding global affairs, but beneath that comforting fiction lies a brutal reality. That might makes right. But the reality is much darker. These structures don't exist primarily to restrain the powerful. They exist to make the rest of us feel safer, to give a veneer of order to chaos. They serve as a collective illusion, a shared story that suggests justice and fairness. For weaker states and ordinary people, these rules are reassurance. They offer hope that justice might prevail, yet that hope is often nothing but a fragile myth, shattered in moments of crisis. Yet history repeatedly proves otherwise. Every so-called rules-based order has collapsed the moment the enforcement of those rules became inconvenient for those wielding real force. The moment a nation's interests clash with the global consensus, the rules evaporate, revealing the brutal truth. Power is the ultimate arbiter. The global order is less a system of law and more a reflection of who can enforce their will, an unspoken dominance that leaves many voiceless and powerless. And right now, we are witnessing this pattern again. Trump's maneuvers in Venezuela, his posturing over Greenland, and America's ongoing rediscovery of raw power, these aren't isolated incidents. They're the latest chapter in a long story, the story of a world where might makes right, and where legal language is just a veneer over the reality of dominance. It's a stark reminder that no matter how loud the rhetoric, force remains the final word. Because when pressure mounts, whether through economic sanctions, military threats, or diplomatic isolation, doctrines turn to dust, norms evaporate, and the oldest rule in human history reasserts itself. Those with strength decide what's right. Power, not principle, is the only law that truly matters. This isn't chaos. It's not madness. It's a return to the core mechanics of power that have defined international relations for centuries, before we dress them up in legal language and diplomatic jargon. It's a brutal reminder that beneath the veneer of international institutions lies a simple but brutal truth. Power persists, and it always will. And beneath that truth is a sobering realization that justice in the end often bows to force. And if you want to understand the chaos of today, you have to grasp the doctrine America never stopped believing in. Only the language around it changed. The game remains the same: survival of the strongest. Up to this point, this probably sounds like a Trump story, but if you think this begins, or ends, with Trump, you've missed the point entirely. Because what you're witnessing isn't a man breaking the system, it's the system reverting to its default settings, its original brutal blueprint, a blueprint written in blood and conquest. Long before the United Nations or international law, before the idea of a global community, the world operated on one fundamental principle: power. The stories we tell are just illusions layered over a brutal reality that never changed. Force first, law second, and when law exists, it's only to formalize outcomes already decided by strength, an echo of dominance, not fairness. The Monroe Doctrine wasn't a diplomatic suggestion, it was a warning. This hemisphere is ours, and we'll decide what's allowed here. It was about asserting dominance, not asking for permission. Power shaped history, not treaties. Venezuela, Greenland, trade routes, sanctions, military bases. Different century, same logic. The tools change, but the principle remains. Control the territory, control the narrative. Power rewrites the rules as it pleases. The so-called rules-based order didn't fail because someone broke the rules. It failed because it was never meant to survive when power is truly tested. It was a fragile illusion, a delicate house of cards built on the assumption that strength would never be questioned. It was always a facade, an arrangement that held only as long as the strongest players allowed it to. When the foundation shifts, the illusion crumbles. Once that becomes clear, you stop asking who violated what rule and start asking who has the strength to write the next one, who holds the power to shape the future. Because the real question isn't about adherence, it's about dominance. Who's strong enough to shape the future? Who's willing to rewrite the rules in their own image? In 1823, the United States wasn't yet a superpower. It lacked aircraft carriers, global bases, or the military reach it would later develop. But it said something that changed the course of history. President James Monroe stood before Congress and drew an invisible line across the map with words, "Not armies." This hemisphere is no longer open for European interference. There was no international court backing him, no UN resolution, no global enforcement mechanism, just a promise, an assertion of future power, and it echoed through history, shaping generations. It was a declaration of intent, backed by the threat of violence if necessary. Power was the only language that mattered, and for decades the world ignored it. America at the time couldn't enforce it, yet. But here's the part most forget. As America grew stronger, industrially, militarily, economically, the doctrine didn't change. It deepened, hardened into a blueprint for action. Gunboats on distant shores, coups in foreign capitals, sanctions choking economies, interventions shaping geopolitics. These were the tools that turned Monroe's words into reality. Power dictated the outcome, not diplomacy. The Monroe Doctrine wasn't enforced by laws or treaties, it was enforced by time, by the accumulation of power and will. That's why when Trump talks about Venezuela, or floats the idea of buying Greenland, it might seem absurd. But only if you believe the myth, the idea that America stopped thinking in hemispheres, or that it surrendered to international institutions. The myth that America somehow abandoned its old ways, that it's now a nation of laws rather than power. It didn't forget. It simply stopped advertising. The old blueprint remains, buried beneath the new language. Because doctrines don't die when they're written down, they die when the power behind them is exhausted. And right now, that power is still very much alive. And that's the real lesson. The rules are always provisional. They're written in the language of strength, and they're rewritten when the underlying power shifts. The mistake is thinking America is the only nation that remembers how power works. It isn't. Countries like China and Russia have learned the same brutal lessons. They see treaties as tools to be bent or broken. They understand institutions as frameworks to be absorbed or ignored. When enforcement is optional, they act silently, strategically, ruthlessly. So it's no longer a unipolar world. It's a battlefield of overlapping spheres, each asserting its own red lines, each rewriting the rules in real time. Power isn't static, it's fluid, adaptable, relentless. America controls its hemisphere, China dominates its near seas and supply chains, Russia holds its borderlands and frozen conflicts. Each one plays this ancient game of dominance, of survival. The global order hasn't collapsed into chaos, it's fractured into zones of influence, each governed by their own rules, enforced by their own strength. And the real danger isn't just war tomorrow, it's miscalculation, mistakes born from overconfidence or underestimating the other side. Trust erodes, alliances fray, and the world becomes a chessboard of competing powers, each waiting for the other to blink. This isn't a new Cold War, it's older than that. It's the world returning to its roots. Only now, everyone has the power to enforce their version of reality. And that's when the rules stop pretending to matter and start being written in real time. The real question isn't whether America, China, or Russia are breaking the rules, it's whether the rules were ever anything more than a story told by the strong while it suited them.